I was on the floor of my own company's awards gala, the corner of the trophy table cutting into my cheek, blood sliding into the collar of the dress I'd bought for this exact night, while my boss stood over me adjusting his cufflinks, like he'd simply bumped into furniture. Before I tell you the rest of my story, I want to know, what city are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and seeing how far this community reaches gives me strength to keep sharing. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Vanessa Cole. I am 30 years old. And what I am about to tell you is the story of how the people who were supposed to champion my career tried to steal everything I had built, and how I made sure they never had the chance to do it again. I'd spent 8 years climbing my way up as a software engineer in Chicago, the kind of career built on 70-hour weeks and a stubborn refusal to let anyone else's mediocrity become my problem. I came from a family with no connections in tech, no relatives who could make a phone call on my behalf, no safety net if I failed. Every internship I got because I sent 40 applications and followed up on every single one myself. I taught myself half the languages I use on the job, from free tutorials at 2 in the morning, after 12-hour shifts at a call center that paid my way through college. Nobody handed me anything. I built every line of my resume myself, including a 2-bedroom condo in Logan Square closed on 2 years ago for $370,000. Every dollar of the down payment earned through bonuses I'd fought for line by line, negotiated in rooms where I was always the only woman and usually the youngest person at the table. My husband, Caleb Whitfield, was a corporate attorney who had sat through enough dinners with my coworkers to know exactly what kind of office I worked in. He used to tell me after every company event that the way my boss took up all the air in a room wasn't leadership. It was hunger, and that hunger like that always eventually eats something real. Caleb had grown up with a father who ran his own small firm into the ground through exactly this kind of ego, so he recognized the pattern in Gregory before I was willing to admit I saw it too. There were nights he'd come home from picking me up at the office at 11 p.m. and just hold my hand in the car, not saying anything, because he knew that if he said what he was really thinking, I wasn't ready to hear it yet. My boss, Gregory Pierce, was the VP of Strategy at Bridgeport Analytics, and he ran our department the way some men run a dinner table. They've never once cooked for loudly, and like he owned every plate on it. He had built his entire career on a reputation for vision, which in practice meant he was extraordinary at describing other people's work in his own words. During board meetings, I once watched him scream at a junior analyst for 40 straight minutes over a $200 expense, report error until she was crying in front of the entire floor, then fire her by email an hour later like the tears had simply confirmed his decision. Nobody on the team ever pushed back, because pushing back on Gregory meant your next project mysteriously got reassigned to someone more aligned with leadership's vision. His favorite line, delivered with a smile that never once reached his eyes, was, "I built this department with people who do as they're told, not people who think they're entitled to a spotlight." He said it to me directly once 3 years ago, the first time I asked why my name wasn't on a press release about a tool I'd architected from the ground up. Our COO, Diane Marsh, was the softer mask over the same machine. She cared more about how the firm looked to its board than how anyone inside it actually felt. And she had a gift for making cowardice sound like wisdom. A year before any of this, I'd quietly filed an HR complaint after Gregory took sole credit for a project I'd built from scratch, presenting it to the entire executive team as his personal initiative, while I sat 2 seats away saying nothing because I'd been told beforehand that interrupting him in front of the board would look unprofessional. Diane sat me down afterward, patted my hand like I was a child who'd skinned her knee, and told me, "We don't air dirty laundry in front of clients, Vanessa. Have some perspective." The complaint vanished from the HR system within a week, and when I asked about it, I was told the case had been resolved internally, whatever that meant. I learned, slowly and painfully, that in that building, being right was never the same thing as being protected. And then there was Kevin Bates, a junior analyst Gregory had taken under his wing the moment he noticed. Kevin laughed at all the right jokes and never once contradicted him in a meeting. Kevin had been handed promotion after promotion, despite producing almost nothing original, propped up entirely by Gregory's favor and a steady stream of work that quietly originated from other people's desks. 8 months ago, Kevin submitted an analysis I had built line by line, the data pipeline, the modeling logic, the entire client-facing narrative, under his own name for a client deliverable, and walked away with a $15,000 bonus while I got a great work team email sent to a distribution list of 40 people. When I brought it up to him directly, in the break room, quietly, his only response was a shrug and relax. It's not that big a deal. Everyone reuses old slides. That's just how the sausage gets made. He said it while eating a sandwich. Like the conversation wasn't even worth setting it down for. The small crime came 6 months before the gala. Gregory presented the predictive modeling platform. I had built the actual core algorithm behind it, the one our biggest client's entire renewal depended on onto our board as his own. Strategic initiative, walking the room through architecture decisions. He couldn't have explained if his life depended on it, because he'd had me prep his talking points. The night before, under the guise of making sure leadership has the full picture. When I raised it privately afterward, standing in his office doorway with my hands shaking, he told me my promotion review was coming up soon and that team players didn't make noise right before review season. So I spent 2 unpaid weekends rebuilding the deck to match his narrative, color-coding slides so he wouldn't stumble over technical terms he didn't understand, telling myself it was the last time I'd let it slide. I told Caleb it was the last time too. He didn't believe me, and he was right not to. It wasn't the last trap. The Innovation Awards Gala was held at a downtown hotel ballroom, attended by nearly every executive from Heritage National Bank, the client whose $12 million multi-year contract renewal hinged entirely on the platform I'd built with my own hands over 18 months. Caleb felt the shift in the room the second. Gregory accepted the award on stage and didn't say my name once, not even in the obligatory "and the team behind this" line every other award recipient that night had used. He leaned over and said, low and urgent, "Vanessa, something is wrong here. We need to leave right now." I told him it was just Gregory being Gregory, that I wasn't going to let his ego ruin a night I'd actually earned, that I'd worked too hard to get this platform built to skip the one event where the client who mattered most was finally in the room. I wanted one more time to believe credit might finally land where it belonged, that maybe tonight, in front of people who actually understood the technology, the truth would simply speak for itself. During the Q&A right after the award, the Heritage Bank CTO asked Gregory one direct question: how the model handled the cold start. Problem for new accounts. And Gregory's answer dissolved into vague buzzwords within seconds, the kind of stumble that makes a room of engineers go very quiet, the kind of silence that has a temperature to it, cold and prickling against the back of my neck. Sensing the silence turning dangerous, Gregory scanned the room, found me, and called me up to the podium for a team recognition moment, the microphone catching every word. Once I was beside him, still live, he asked me to confirm publicly that the platform was a true team effort, no single owner, and slid a 1-page IP acknowledgement toward me to sign on the spot, right there under the stage lights, in front of the exact clients deciding whether to renew based on that ownership. I felt the paper under my fingers, the pen he pressed into my palm, the heat of 200 eyes on me. I said no, one word, calm, cold, final. Gregory's smile cracked instantly, into something the cameras weren't supposed to catch. "You are humiliating me in front of the people who fund this entire department," he hissed, low enough that only I could hear it, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise as I turned to step off the riser. When I pulled away, he shoved me, and my heel caught the edge of the stage step, sending me down into the corner of the awards table, the trophy base catching my cheekbone with a sharp, brittle crack that swallowed the room's applause whole. Blood slid warm along my jaw, and through the high ringing in my ears I heard Diane's voice cut through the silence to ask everyone to please remain calm, that this was clearly just an unfortunate accident, nothing more. Kevin didn't move. He sipped his drink, eyes flicking toward the bar instead of toward me. A dozen phones rose into the air, screens glowing, recording everything, the cold ballroom floor pressing up against my cheek as I lay there and the room blurred white at the edges. As I lay there on that cold ballroom floor, my cheek throbbing in time with my pulse, I felt something inside me finally snap clean in half. The engineer who had spent 8 years quietly absorbing other people's credit, color-coding her own erasure to keep the peace, died right there on that floor. What stood up and slowly, with blood dripping off, my jaw and my hands perfectly steady, was someone else entirely. Caleb crossed that ballroom like the building was burning. He didn't go after Gregory first. He dropped to his knees beside me, checked the cut along my cheekbone, and only once he was sure I was fully conscious did he stand and put himself between me and Gregory, his voice flattening into something colder than I had ever heard from him in 9 years together. He pulled out his phone and called 911 on speaker, loud enough for the entire room of executives to hear the dispatcher ask the nature of the emergency. And he said clearly, "Assault at the Continental Hotel ballroom. My wife is bleeding from a head injury. Suspect is still on scene." Then he turned to Gregory and said the only thing he ever said to him, with real heat behind it. "You will lose this department. You will lose your name on that patent, and by the time my firm is finished, the only thing left of your career will be a deposition transcript." What none of them knew was that Bridgeport's own marketing team had set up a continuous unedited live stream recording of the entire gala for next year's promotional reel, capturing Gregory's fumbled answer to the CTO's question, the demand at the podium, the grab, the shove, and the fall, all in clean, undeniable footage with audio no one could later dispute or explain away as an accident. The police arrived 7 minutes later. 3 officers moving through the ballroom's tall windows with red and blue, light sweeping across 200, frozen faces, their boots loud against the same floor I was still bleeding on. Gregory insisted I had simply tripped on the riser, his voice pitching higher with every repetition, until the hotel's AV manager quietly handed an officer a drive with the marketing footage. I heard the click of the cuffs before I saw them, a small mechanical sound that filled the entire silent ballroom, and Gregory screamed that this would end careers as they walked him out past the very clients he'd spent the night trying to impress. The Heritage Bank CTO stood, set down his napkin with deliberate calm, and told Diane on his way to the door that the bank would only continue renewal discussions if I personally led the account going forward, and that Bridgeport had exactly 1 week to make that happen. From an urgent care exam room with 5 stitches along my cheekbone, I started making calls. Gregory was charged with felony aggravated battery, facing up to 4 years given the documented injury and the unedited footage. Caleb's firm filed an emergency claim establishing my sole inventorship on the predictive modeling patent, stripping Gregory's name from the filing entirely within the month. I submitted the original buried HR complaint, along with a year of email evidence, showing the credit pattern with Kevin's deliverable, directly to the board's audit committee, which voted to terminate Gregory within the week and accepted Diane's resignation days, later once her cover-up surfaced in the same investigation. And true to his word, the Heritage Bank CTO signed the renewed $12 million contract, with my name listed as lead engineer of record, with Bridgeport's legal team having no leverage left to object to any term I asked for. Gregory never got his team effort acknowledgement. He got a deposition and an empty office where his name used to be on the door. They thought taking my work would make me smaller. They were wrong. Some people only learn whose name belongs on the work once the truth is the only thing left standing.